Wellas here, and I'm back with another dose of the good stuff. Now in this video, we're going to talk about Mark Scout's character from the perspective of the person who played him, Adam Scott. We'll also get into some of the behind the scenes stuff related to Ricken's book, and finally some updates and speculations regarding the release of season 2 and a bit of channel news. So stay to the end if you're interested in that part of it. Sound good? Bet. Before we kick things off, I have to warn you, this video is filled to the brim with everything from minor details to massive reveals. So if that's something you don't want, then I suggest you wait for the next elevator. Big shout out to these tinfoilers that you see here. These fine people made the choice to support the channel, and I appreciate every single one of you. Check out the free Discord here if you want to chat it up with the gang about this show and any of the others that I cover. Also, by the time my next video drops, I will have chosen an official social for the channel, which is really strange for an introvert like me who avoids all social media like the plague. It's gotta be done. That's it for the intro. Strap in, tinfoil gang, because it's time to dive. Where do I even begin? Maybe we'll start with the guy in the thumbnail. Adam breathes life into Mark Scott, a character that is arguably the main character of season 1. It's through his eyes that we experience the show's deepest mysteries, so there's a lot riding on getting a compelling story out of this performance. Scott's portrayal of the mild-mannered salaryman acts as a grounding force for the audience, because much of this story in season 1 is filtered through his unique experience. Mark's Audi is the only Audi we actually get to know. This very specific view gives us a look straight into the heart of the psychological horror that exists right below the surface of this quaint, sleepy little town. It's not all Gucci on the main streets of Kier, PA. Now, if you're not familiar with his previous work, Adam's known as an actor with a knack for playing the straight man in a comedic style of acting. It takes a unique set of traits to do this kind of role and remain interesting among all the chaos of the surrounding story. Up until now, I'd never seen Adam play a true dramatic part, so I was really impressed with his performance because he was just so believable. Adam Scott kind of reminds me of Paul Rudd. He's an actor in that same vein. He can be funny, charismatic, and even deep, but he does it all with this sort of unexpected dry wit that makes the characters he plays that much more complex. To put it in the simplest terms, he's very good at showing emotions without needing to say much. Who knows, maybe it's the kind eyes. This is why I think he's perfect for the role of Mark, a character who suffers abuse and mistreatment while giving us the room to empathize, and we can still appreciate the darkly humorous aspect of the circumstances he finds himself in. Adam Scott did the usual interview circuit for Severance around the time of its release, and he has a lot to say about the role. He keeps his commentary limited though. He's easily the most tight-lipped of all the cast interviews, choosing not to make any kind of speculations about season 2. Unfortunately. That was a tiny bit disappointing, but all is not lost. After watching and reading every interview I could find, I dug up a few interesting vittles to share. Now, the first interview involves both Ben Stiller and Adam Scott over at Screen Rant. Scott talks about what he thinks Mark is trying to accomplish in the story, and in short, the answer is, well, nothing. And that's pretty much the core problem with Mark. According to Adam, after the unexpected death of Gemma, Mark isn't so much stuck as he's choosing not to move forward. There are signs in conversations with his sister, Devin, played by Jen Tulloch, that hint to a history of perhaps having a tough love, neglectful type of childhood. And Mark has refused Devin's attempts at dragging him out of his current emotional rut for a while now. Mark is a guy who, in the outside world, he's a bit stuck. He's grieving his wife, who died a couple of years ago, and he's made a choice to not move on and to stay right where he is, and he's made the decision to sever. So Mark finds himself trapped in a curious sort of limbo here. It's like an invisible cage where he's both the prisoner and the warden. Severance becomes his escape, offering a break from the pain of loss. He was so racked with grief that getting through the day was a challenge for him, leading to him struggling at his job as a college professor. And there's also the other problem that never seems to go away: bills. Mark believed that he could find some sort of comfort through severing himself, but also it's another way to keep the lights on in the process. I read this character as someone who has chosen to weaponize his grief. Moving on feels like a betrayal of what he and Gemma had. And we've all felt the urge to wallow in our pain, and Mark's journey forces us to confront that universal truth. This relatable human struggle makes this character really work. For a lot of fans of the show, Mark's display of grief could also be read as guilt. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm kinda on that train. See, this fits right into the theory that Mark was somehow responsible for Gemma's accident. I get that uneasy feeling just saying that, but it does track with the story. I think if this turns out to be the case, it's it's even easier to imagine Mark wanting to be severed. Who wouldn't want to forget that? Adam Scott also gave an interesting answer to a question about his character. The question, paraphrased, was what does he think Mark knew about Lumon before he got severed? And this is what he had to say. I think that Lumon was this omnipresent company like Procter & Gamble, where you look at your cereal and you're like, oh my God, they make that. They make my air conditioner. They make my flip-flops. One of those companies that has sort of always been there and has its fingers in a lot of different pies. This particular company is in tech as well, and also has a history like a Kellogg's vibe of health and wellness going back to the 19th century. Tonics and elixirs and stuff. Like a frog in boiling water, you don't really give the company a lot of thought. It's in town and it's always been there, so it's always been an option. So he compares Lumon to a real-life company like the ancient Procter & Gamble Corporation. If you were to ask 100 Americans if they've ever heard of Procter & Gamble, I bet a majority would respond positively. But how many people could name a product made by them? I tried and failed. Lumon is just kind of there in the background, as unassuming as that snake in the grass that you just haven't noticed yet. But they are there in the shadows, manipulating and watching everything. Is it just me, or am I hearing echoes of 1984 here? Shop talk is always interesting to me because I'm kind of fascinated by how the film and TV industry really works, like the nitty gritty. That was a topic of discussion when Scott took an interview at the AV Club. In the interview, they asked Adam about what it was like to try to play two characters that are essentially versions of the same person. I never thought about how much planning would have to go into a role like this until I read this response. Splitting up the character was an interesting journey. We thought of approaching it in different ways, but ultimately settled on figuring out how to make it clear that this is the same guy, but we're seeing two components or halves of him. One of them has 40 or so odd years of experience, the other has 2.5 years of being alive inside Lumon. It became a matter of how it manifests emotionally, physically, and if there's a slightly different tenor in the voice. Finding out all of these things about Mark Scout was really fun. Imagine trying to reverse engineer a character from another, distilling them down to their basic elements to create something new. You have to be able to communicate the differences between these two through acting, while still maintaining our belief that they are essentially the same. Not an easy task, but it sounds like he enjoyed the challenge. He said something similar in an interview at Uprocks. He says, there are feelings and emotions that sort of carry over, but any Mark doesn't know what those are, how to locate or name them. He just knows there are feelings in there, and sometimes he gets to work and he has tears in his eyes and he just has no idea. Now, I particularly like this excerpt because it confirms what we've been guessing is going on within the severed side of the person. It seems that they do share the same psyche as the host. The split in personality is only surface level, so to speak, leaving a remnant that still animates the personality. The deeper core elements of the person remain the same. That includes things like trauma, emotional scars, and their main personality traits. This means that a character like Dylan, a go-getter, goal-oriented type, is likely to be the same way on the outside. I guess we'll have to wait to confirm. So yeah, Mark Scout is a very compelling character, and the recipe for his success is pretty simple. He's a very honest actor. But his character is also motivated by something every human being experiences and understands. And making him a central character gives us a means to connect to the main conflict of the story. I love it when a plan works out. Alright, so let's switch gears real quick before we end this video. And I want to talk about the book that I haven't had the pleasure of reading, and I hope that one day this dream does come true. The UUR has a very interesting story. Many apologies for that pun. So showrunner Dan Erickson explained the purpose of the book being in the story, and it's pretty eye-opening, only because he literally calls the book a manifesto for the working class, dispelling any doubts as to its purpose as a counteracting force to the board's version of Gear's vision. Its purpose is clear. It's meant to offer a worker-centric alternative to the unfeeling corporate-controlled way of life. This book is the catalyst for the uprising and the subsequent plan to launch the OTC and make a jailbreak in the finale of season 1. It's just hilarious to think that the man behind the workers' revolution is this guy. This guy, like some cross between Cesar Chavez and Joe Pera. Shout out to Michael Chernus, and this message is to the writers. We better see a lot more of Ricken in season 2. Seriously though, I hope the fact that this book is so important to the story is a sign that Ricken will play a bigger part in the story going forward. I seriously can't wait to see if they actually release this as a book, because it's a must-cop situation all the way around. I mean, in what other piece of literary fire will you find such spicy lines as, "A society with festering workers cannot flourish, just as a man with rotting toes cannot skip." Or how about this one? What separates a man from machine is that machines cannot think for themselves. Also, they are made of metal, whereas man is made of skin. Yo, how am I gonna get through this? And finally, my personal favorite, at the center of industry. At the center of industry is dust. I'm gonna stop there before things get out of control and somebody gets hurt. If you want to see the rest of these hotlines, I'll leave a link to the wiki where they compiled every known line from the 80-page written sample for your reading pleasure. That's the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you already know what to do. I want to make a few short announcements. First of all, we're going to be hitting 10K subs very soon. Yes, that's actually happening. I have to slap myself every time I think about it. But what I want to do is do something special again, like I did for 1,000. So I'm going to do another Ask Me Anything, but I'm also going to be doing a few other different things in that video. But yeah, it's gonna happen, and I have all you guys to thank for it. I am truly grateful, and yeah, we're looking forward to that. I think that's gonna be a good time. There's no word on Severance Season 2 as far as dates. The only thing we've gotten so far is some teasers on Twitter, but they do say that they're working on it. Everything we've heard falls in line with that production is either close to done or about to wrap. I would say that we're probably looking at another 6 months before we actually see it once it's done. Who knows? We could be wrong, and it could end up happening much sooner. I hope. Fingers crossed. And also, the last thing I want to mention is what I want to start doing is when you guys leave comments, you guys always leave amazing comments, and I feel bad that I don't get to really say something about that. If you have theories, questions, comments, leave them in this video, and in the next video, I'm going to address some of them. But the ones that are most interesting or funny or whatever, I'll address those in the next video, and I'm going to make that a regular thing. Thanks for staying to the end. If you did, you're a star. I appreciate you. Be good to yourselves, be good to others, and until next time, off you go.